I thought we were going to keep it silly.
But silly in like an apocalyptic way.
Okay. Yes. Like a Mike Judge kind of way.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to be silly about the apocalypse, which that's probably the best you can do. All right. Let me do a quick little intro, I guess. And then we'll jump into it. I'll play the music, but I'll probably end up cutting that shit out. All right, 3, 2, 1. All right, what the fuck is up, you guys? We are back with another episode of the Known Vote. We're going to take that one more time. All right.
Roll again.
Quiet on set, please. All right, guys, what's up? Welcome to another episode of the No Fun Zone podcast. Guess who the fuck is back with me? It's Charlie. All right, guys, we're back. Say hello to the people, Charlie.
Hello, people.
So this is the first one you and I've recorded since the video aspect has been incorporated. So now the whole world gets to see your smiling face.
Oh yeah, didn't we do one with video last time I was there? Did it not work out?
It didn't work out.
That was when you were still testing the cameras. Okay.
Yeah, testing technical difficulties, all that shit. Speaking of technical difficulties, we're gonna jump right into the topics of today. Charlie brought to my attention, apparently the whole internet is gonna come crashing down in the near future, which is very exciting because I think that's gonna be the end of all things forever. So I was sort of reading that article you sent. What's it called?
Did I send it to you? I saw it in a newsfeed. I actually didn't.
Oh no, I just Googled it, I guess, actually. But yeah, a bad solar storm could cause an internet apocalypse. Thoughts on that?
It's scary, you know, the level of dependency, reliance that everyone has on the internet, and just that's all grown in the last couple decades.
Not even just people, but society. Society just
society
revolves
as a
around
whole.
the internet.
Yeah, everything is built on it, you know. So I think
We're
Mr.
doomed.
Robot is like a light version of what would happen, you know. You see Mr. Robot?
Mr. Robot? No.
That's a really good show. Yeah.
Okay.
It's like, you know, hacktivist kind of show, and the guy like
Hacktivist.
wants to stick it to the man. Yeah, like hack the big companies.
Are you talking about QAnon? Or is that what we're getting into? We're getting into QAnon early on this one?
Not even close. No, he's like the digital Robin Hood, right? Like he basically hacks into the system and wipes out everybody's debt and everything along with it. So then like the entire financial system collapses.
I mean, that's good if you're in debt. That's not so good if you have some money saved up.
I know, but it turns into like a bunch of chaos, right? Because there's all these unintended consequences of fucking with the system that's that big. And
sure.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you mess with anything, there's, you know, it's the butterfly effect, you know what I mean? Yeah. One thing affects absolutely everything else, especially in a complex system. But I guess what is it? The people on Reddit kind of sort of did that. What was that, like maybe 9 months ago or something? The AMC stock and the GameStop.
Yeah.
Or GameStop stock. Which is kind of like
sticking it to the people that are just ripping everybody off.
Well, and like, you know, Wall Street has been doing the exact same thing for decades, and they've been hedging their own bets and making sure that they come across, you know, I mean, they'll game the system to make sure that they get their way. But then all of a sudden, when like more of a grassroots kind of movement, like what happened on Reddit, when they start doing that, all of a sudden, like, oh no, this is actually corrupt, and you can't do that, and that's illegal, and we're gonna hack all of you guys, and we're gonna dox you, and we're gonna fuck your world up. But as long as you do it within the system, then it's okay, because then everyone who's in the system is making money.
Right. Yeah. Well, that is the American way. How can I fuck over as many people as possible and make as much money at the same time?
Oh, capitalism.
And then, once the, you know, majority, the population figures out that they can band together to do the same thing, then that top percentage is going to be pretty pissed.
This harkens back to the days of the French Revolution. Once the bourgeoisie, once the majority of the people understand that the bourgeoisie is a fallacy and it can be just taken down, That's something I was thinking about when I was looking at like videos last night. Is the sort of, I guess, the fragile ecosystem of like the celebrity class, and like uh, the theory that I have going is that the celebrity class has taken over essentially what like the royal monarchs and the bourgeoisie were, for the 1800s and early 1900s, and that's the new royalty, is celebrity. But it's all just predicated on our belief in their celebrity.
Mm-hmm.
The Kardashians are only relevant because we give them relevancy. Mm-hmm. Same thing with like the monarchy and like the British royal family. They only really have legitimacy because the majority of the population believes in their legitimacy.
Yeah.
And also the same thing with our money. The only reason why our money has any value whatsoever is because we all just believe that it has the value that it has.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you could take it a step further and say, the reason that anything exists or has any reason is because it's, a kind of acknowledged in reality, and like, the consensus of.
But it's acknowledged in reality by the masses. So it's the masses that truly have the power. Yet we've all been convinced that we don't have the power. There's nothing we can do until, a collective movement starts, which is why Charlie and I are proposing a full-scale revolution against Charlie's face. Get your pitchforks, get your torches, and we're heading out. We're gonna burn down this horrible corporatocracy that we're living in nowadays. Right, Charlie?
Yeah, totally. Armed to the teeth.
It's always so funny to me nowadays when people talk about I mean, a lot of it's like Second Amendment people, and just like, I have guns because I want to be able to make sure that my government doesn't get tyrannical, so we can take the government over and we can cause revolution. Good luck with that, dude. Does your little bunker that you have all your weapons stockaded in have Tomahawk missiles? No. Do you have drones? No. All right, good luck taking down the U.S. government.
Well, I don't know how political we want to get, but the scary part is when those kind of mentalities overlap with people that actually do have some sort of power or accessibility to significant military.
Yeah, that's how you get an Oklahoma City bombing.
Yeah.
That's Timothy McVeigh.
There's always a way. So there's almost no way that all those people, on their own or even in a band, but again, the masses, you get enough people with that mentality, it's going to mean something eventually.
Yeah. Well, and the interesting kind of idea is more of the idea of like a leaderless revolution, which is sort of, I mean, that's essentially kind of what like the Taliban is maybe not the Taliban, but having more of a movement that doesn't have specific directives coming from a central leader means that you can have just ancillary groups sort of acting of their own volition, but everyone's moving towards like a central goal. But it's disorganized. It's not like, a drug cartel is set up where there's like the leader of the drug cartel and then there's like subordinates. It's set up almost military style. So if you cut off the head, you kill the snake. With like
and a lot of control systems for any type of personnel are the same way. Like in companies, like the hierarchies of military or job title, like there's almost always that kind of thing. And in politics, right, there's like a trickle down effect of who's at the top and who feeds information both ways. But it's interesting because we're talking about the internet possibly facing a significant issue, and it does sound a lot like the digital movement to a decentralized internet. It's the same kind of
and wasn't that up for ballot like a few years ago? What did they call it? Basically the whole internet debacle, I think it was maybe 2016, maybe after, but like essentially shutting down the internet or like speeding up the internet for certain providers or certain websites and slowing it down. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah, where the ISP was allowed to throttle or control, like
Yeah,
basically they could accept like bribes from Netflix to give Netflix priority traffic and shit like
exactly.
that. And it's like you're
Net
completely
neutrality.
net
That's
neutrality.
what it
Yep,
was
there
called.
it is.
Yes.
Well, and I think the fight for that is real, obviously, and there's still a lot of things going both directions. But the biggest advocate against, those kind of schemes of people putting limits and making money is, all the control is in the ISPs. It's just another, monopoly separated with, west, central, east. I think there's like, 5 major providers. There's a couple more. I'm lucky in
Right.
Longmont to get mine from the city directly, but that's rare. And so the decentralized internet concept removes, the requirement to connect to the internet through a gateway like an ISP, not the guys in South Park like, oh, sorry, I don't know what to say. There's no one else here. Like, fuck you. It's basically
I'm
everyone
headed
has
out to
so much.
California. I heard they got internet that way.
Well, there's technology has blown up so much in the past couple of decades that there's so many idle devices in the world, like when your phone's in your pocket or your computer's on and you're not using it. Like so many things are connected to the internet, but not doing anything.
Not active at the moment.
Yeah, it's just similar to, the whole blockchain movement and idea is connecting everything, but nothing is explicitly dependent on anything else, right? So if you lose a link, everything could theoretically still function. And that way, like everyone would opt in and then everyone's device becomes a piece of the internet. And now instead of
Wow.
the internet living on servers in warehouses where you have to pay Comcast to talk to it, everyone is participating in supporting and accessing the same thing. That's a really vague way of putting it, but
Interesting.
layman's is kind of like that.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, I mean, doesn't that still sort of happen between servers, where like if you send an email, directly from someone somewhere in the U.S. to another person in the U.S., that email or that information gets routed through other servers that are potentially in different countries. And that's
Yeah,
how
so
like the
there's
government's
still
gotten
a
around like sort of the privacy laws of America, and that's how they've discovered certain things is by once it crosses international borders, now the NSA can start taking your information.
Yeah, there's a lot of hopping between nodes and servers for everything that you do on the internet. But ultimately someone is, renting either physical or virtual server space to like respond with a website that you're looking at.
Dude.
So instead of, Amazon owning 90% of the internet, it would go back to the people, and 5 billion phones would now store the same. It's not exactly how it works, but that's kind of the idea.
Yeah, I get the general idea. It still terrifies me. Like this is sort of a good segue into something else that I wanted to talk about. Is just like the movement into an almost purely digital age is kind of freaking me the fuck out. Like everything is moving into just purely digital, and that in my mind doesn't seem like it's going to have the same kind of longevity. I mean, I don't know, it's just the idea of every bit of information being stored online or in this virtual world, or even sort of we were going to get to the idea of the new Fox show of like pop stars living in a virtual world. And then when you start breaking things down and going further and exploring, virtual reality is going to become more prominent, and that's going to eventually get to a point where it's almost indistinguishable from real life. And then that gets into the philosophical conflict of like the Matrix. Do you accept the fake world that's all digital, or do you sort of try and hang on to whatever reality actually is?
At a high level, conceptually, I think that's already a thing, right? Like people are accepting what they see on their Facebook feed, right? Like that is their reality. And
Sure.
it's not to the level of physically seeing, hearing, or feeling things that are, virtual, but it's going there.
Oh, it's
But
moving there.
people are already in the, headspace of letting the digital technology define their reality, at least from a mental standpoint.
Yeah. Well, and it also seems like when you do that, I mean, it's going to get worse, but people are already creating their own reality of who they want to be online. Your Facebook
Mm-hmm.
profile or your Instagram profile, it's all curated to what you are sort of choosing to be to the world, as opposed to, just you being yourself as a person. And like everyone
Yeah.
has flaws, but you don't project the flaws on Instagram, you know, and people
There's probably a couple
photoshopping.
exceptions of people that are just 100% open and honest, but you're right. I
Oh
think
yeah, totally.
easily majority of that. It actually reminds me of
Well, but
South Park, as most things remind me of South Park. The Photoshop episode. Like,
yeah, yeah, that's what I was gonna start.
why can't you guys just be okay with yourselves? Like,
Right. Yeah. I mean, we're all flawed. And that's another thing with the idea of celebrity is celebrities are presented. I mean, Britney Spears is a great example, and especially with all the free Britney stuff that's going around and talking about getting her out of her conservatorship. Um, but like the Britney Spears and the Christina Aguileras and the Justin Biebers of the world and the Miley Cyruses, they're presented very much so in like a flawless manner as much as they can be, at least like the not trainers, but the people that like their job is to sort of move them around, and like the publicists, they're trying to present these people as like perfect flawless people,
mm-hmm.
which is just
Well, it's the same idea. It's the epitome of what everyone else is doing on Instagram and Facebook. Like so many people
exactly.
have their eyes on these people that they want to be as flawless and perfect all the time. But then that translates into the masses idolizing them and striving for things that are, unrealistic, and then setting standards in their own lives that
Totally.
no one else can live up to.
Well, and it's also a chicken and the egg kind of situation, like which came first, the celebrities that propagate are wanting to be perfect, or us wanting to be perfect, and that gets sort of projected onto what celebrities have to be. It's interesting. But that sort of like brings up, so the show we were talking about, what's it called here?
Alter ego.
Alter Ego. Thank you, Charlie, for having a memory that I don't have.
I don't hear that very often.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Charlie's memory usually sucks, dude. No, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, if anybody hasn't seen the advertisements for Alter Ego, it seems very creepy to me. It's a singing competition on Fox, but you're in the back, not being recorded by a video camera. You're in the back being recorded by like the suits with the balls all over it, that sort of the CGI rendering kind of cameras where it just captures your movement, and it then translates your performance into like a real life avatar. And so, when I was watching like the video for it last night, a lot of people were like, oh, I don't think I can make it because of my body, or I have these things that prevent me and are holding me back because of the way that I look. So I'm just going to completely create. It seems so weird. And like we live in a time where there's so much emphasis put on acceptance and body positivity and accepting all these different communities. Yet at the
But
same
at the
time,
same time, yeah, giving them
we're
tools to hide behind who they really
exactly.
are.
So it's like, be yourself, but change everything about yourself so you can be yourself. Which is it's like a conundrum. There's a lack of an actual acceptance of just who you are, what you look like, and I don't know. It's a weird
Well,
time.
and I think that the technology is cool, and I think that some artists could incorporate that, like uh, Daft Punk or Deadmau5, like the
Hmm.
DJs that like their whole thing is like in a suit, or like no one knows what they really look like. Like
Yeah.
that's just part of the act. But when it's done to cover up you because you're ashamed of you, it's like you're kind of counterproductive in, you know, really showing off. And I think
Yeah.
Lady Gaga has always been really good at just like owning it. And she's, you know,
I think,
good looking, but she's also a little bit weird, right? But she
well,
owns it and she kills it.
I think she understood the dynamics of what it takes to become the pop star, become the celebrity. Is the more outrageous you are, the more you get talked about. I.e., how we got President, Donald Trump, is understanding that just like, oh, there's no such thing as bad publicity. The more people are
Again, it comes
talking
back
about
to
you.
the acknowledgement of the masses, right? Like that
Exactly.
makes it real.
Yeah. And so I was going to bring up, I mean, the Gorillas did this before anybody else. You know what I mean?
Oh my God, yeah.
Because the Gorillas, for the longest time, like nobody knew it was Murloc and the other guys. Like I can't remember all the names of the group members, quote unquote. But really, it was just two guys making music, and nobody, for the longest time, I feel like, knew who they were. And all the concerts were essentially completely digital. Where like nobody was on stage; it was just screens that had like this weird performance playing on it. And so the Gorillas were doing this. And then as I researched more, there's a Japanese pop star by the name of Hatsune Miku, who's a completely fictional digitalized character. And fans will even like, it's essentially a program in a computer where you can just put in the lyrics and put in the melody, and it all creates the entire song around just like the inputs that you put in. So anybody could write the song, and it's a weird like collective artist, which is very strange. But one of the things that the Japanese fans were saying is, yeah, it's the masses that create this pop star. And in that sense, it's very literal in that like fans are creating music using this program. But then in a broader sense, yeah, that's kind of what we do anyway. Like the Beehive creates Beyonce, and Beyonce creates the Beehive. You know what I mean? Like, where does it start? Where did it be? I don't know. We're getting down a really weird rabbit hole at this point.
And you had also brought up the correlation between that Black Mirror episode. And one thing that I thought was interesting is in Black Mirror, the judges and the contestant are in person, and the entire audience
is the
avatar, like everyone at home. And it's interesting that it's kind of going the other way around with what's in reality. Like they're doing the show where the contestant is the avatar. Like to have that be the focus is just kind of interesting.
It's just it's extremely reminiscent. And Black Mirror has always been so good about noticing those weird little things that kind of happen in society and making an episode that's sort of a social commentary on them. But when I first, I as cool as the technology is, like you said, when I first saw the commercial for that show, it gave me the heebie-jeebies. I can't explain why, but it felt so weird. Like,
yeah.
And then, going back to the idea of the Matrix is, eventually this was been a philosophical question for a long time is, the idea of if we had a chemical or, a tank that we could submerge you in, like in the Matrix or whatever, where we can literally hook into your central nervous system and we can create whatever reality you want. Would you take the red pill and go into the simulation? Or I guess that's the opposite. Would you take the blue pill and go into the simulation and live your life like that one dude who's like carving the steak up and just like, this steak tastes just as good as it would in the real world, but in the real world, I wouldn't have that option. Or do you take the red pill and you see the world as it really is?
Yeah, I think a lot of people would just say fuck it, keep me in the matrix, right? Like,
Oh, totally. Yeah. You know, especially like, I mean, not necessarily talking about the matrix, but like if you're in a poor place where you can't, there's no possibility of you moving up or making your life any better. Your job is to dig a hole every single day, almost very like Sisyphusian. I don't know if that's actually a word, but the idea of Sisyphus, that's
mm-hmm.
kind of what life is for a lot of people, where it's just, oh, my job is to push this rock up to the top of the hill every single day. And then as soon as I'm done, it rolls back down. And the next day I wake up and have to push that rock up. And I think there's a lot of people that are in that position that would be like, yeah, no, fuck this. Plug me in. Like, life is hard. I don't want to do this. And if you can just make a reality where I don't have to continue to live like this and it can be just, you know, whatever I want, sitting on a yacht with a bunch of beautiful girls in bikinis, drinking champagne, I think there's a lot of people that would take that option.
Yeah, I know. And then you just miss out on real life, right? But
Yeah, but to
that's
you,
kind of
it's indiscernible from real life.
yeah.
Everything
Well, I mean,
feels the same.
the rate that we're going with, you know, ignoring climate change and other things, maybe the world would be so inhospitable that like that's how, you know, I guess that is kind of the matrix, right? Like the world is so fucked. Like humans are just bred for power
because of the robots that we made and gave AI.
Yeah,
dude, terrifying.
Everything's coming true, you guys.
There's not a it's a confusing world we're living in, and it's only going to get more and more confusing. But also, like, you know, it's, I don't know, it's a tough decision because like it does seem enticing. Well, and also there's the argument that our own reality is already just created in our own brain anyway. You know, there's no way for me to, I mean, green could be blue for you from my perspective.
I've always loved that, thinking about that. I've thought about that since I was a kid.
Yeah, well,
like everything is relative.
It's
right?
it's Descartes. The only thing you can prove is that you exist. Everything else is just who knows. But even psychologically, they're saying, I mean, it's your brain constructs reality. You know what I mean? Even the way you see things, everyone's going to see something in a different way, and that's why hallucinogens work. And if you eat a heavy dose of mushrooms or if you take DMT, your reality, your subjective reality of what you see is drastically different from the subjective reality that other people see. And who is to determine which is the true reality? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. In the eyes of the beholder.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the relativity, subjectivity kind of aspect of it. But then if we're able to create a new reality that's quote unquote virtual, is there really any true difference? I'm drinking coffee right now. That is altering my state and how I observe the universe. Because I'm taking
honestly,
coffee.
Another side of this that I've been thinking about is that maybe this is just a synthetic step of evolution, and the next phase of human existence is, you know, consciousness where reality is completely subjective. Like you can do whatever you want, but you are just your essence. Whether that's VR, maybe there's sleeve, like new bodies, like that, what's that, Altered Carbon show on Netflix. Like you are just this chip that you're like a hard drive you're saved into, and you can just like every time you die go into a new body.
Oh, and that's
you know, like, I mean, that's like, is that the next phase of human evolution?
Or is that a description of maybe, I mean, there's simulation theory, like people like Elon Musk, very intelligent people, they believe, and it makes sense, that statistically we're more likely to be in a simulation than not to be in a simulation. Statistically, whether you subscribe to that or not is, you know, your choice. But maybe that's where the idea of like Buddhism and reincarnation comes from, is maybe perhaps we are in a simulation and we are using, I mean, this is a topic that we've talked about for over a decade, is religion just a different way of explaining the science of what the reality is? And that could be, I mean, if we're just chips going through a cog, or like the episode of Rick and Morty where they have a video game and Morty puts his head in and he lives an entire life as another individual. And then he takes his head out and it's actually only been like 15 seconds in his reality. But he still lived a whole other life. So yeah, maybe reincarnation is an explanation before we understood, potentially what's going on. And it may be true that our consciousness is saved in a database somewhere, some universe, something bigger than what we even call a universe that controls the universe that we see.
I like to think of it more as like a reusable system of like resources. So every human being is a drop of water, and you die, you go back to the ocean and a new drop is formed. So it's still the same pool of like energy and life, but it's not the same drop, right? You have this drop, goes back in the ocean, you get a new drop.
Yeah, I mean,
does that make sense? Like it's all reusable kind of in the reincarnation. That's how I like to think about reincarnation.
Well, and it would make sense based on everything that we see and observe in nature. Everything is cyclical. Even just when you get to the more sort of grandiose idea of, how stars are formed. Eventually, I mean, everything collapses down slowly and gets hotter and burns off all of its fuel. And eventually it blows the fuck up, creates a giant cloud, and then slowly gravity starts pulling everything back in together. And it forms a new star out of the same materials of the old star. And I mean, nature is cyclical in nature. So it makes sense that the very fundamental workings of the universe might be sort of cyclical in nature as well.
Yeah, I think, like you just said, religion was just kind of the way that explaining things that we couldn't understand. And that's that other cliche statement, like magic is just science you don't understand yet. And religion is just the epitome of that. But I think that the simplicity and the humility behind Buddhism is probably closest to like, what is actually happening.
Yeah, because Buddhism doesn't prescribe rules quite as much as like, especially Catholicism.
And they don't kill each other over not being Buddhists.
Yeah, exactly.
As far as I know.
Yeah, and I mean, Christianity objectively has a lot of made-up stories. It just does. Buddhism doesn't really have that same kind of element of like almost fantasy, I guess.
Well, it's the fine line between fantasy that is taken literally versus just.
It seems more philosophical.
It's like philosophical, nature. But they're most of them are intended to be like parables, right?
Oh no, yeah, totally, yeah, absolutely.
But so many people take things literally, like God hates gay people. Like, pretty sure that's not one of the commandments or whatever. It's more.
It was written.
Like, come on.
It was written probably fifth or sixth hand away from the person who maybe originally said it. And the telephone game, the more people it gets filtered through, the more languages that the Bible gets filtered through, the more things get conflated and confused. And yeah, it's definitely not meant to be a literal text. But I just think because it is written out and it is said as this is the word of God, people then end up taking it literally instead of like looking at the philosophical nature of and I mean, even just the difference between the two books of the Bible, the Old Testament versus the New Testament, drastically different thematically, drastically different in terms of what the overall message is, what the different in who the God of each parts of the Bible are. Like the Old Testament is a very wrathful, vengeful God, and I smite thee, and I smoteth thee, and I banish thee. And Job, even though you believe me, I'm talking with the devil right now, and the devil says that the only reason why Job follows you is because you gave him all these good things. It's like, oh, I'll prove it to you, devil. I'm going to take all those things away from Job, and I'm literally going to kill his like entire family, take away all of his money and resources.
Yeah.
And he's still going to believe. What a dick
it's
move,
like
by God.
And I think a lot of that comes back to the telephone, and so much of, history, it was locked and controlled with, the church and the literate classes. Is probably scare people into.
Well, I mean, the Catholic Church chose what to tell people, basically. And it's the early Catholic Church in the Holy Roman Empire is so drastically, misinformed from like what the actual teachings of Christ are. Because if you, I think it was one of the founding fathers. It wasn't Benjamin Franklin, but it wasn't Andrew Jackson. One of the original founding fathers of America basically took out all the miracles and all the God references to Jesus's Gospels in the Bible, and just basically put it out as a philosophy book, for lack of a better term. And I think it was just called the Philosophical Teachings of Nazareth, of Jesus of Nazareth. But yeah, if you take away the mumbo jumbo and the hooky spooky stuff, Jesus seems like a pretty cool cat, man.
Yeah, the moral of the story, the summary of his existence is don't be a dick.
Yeah.
All right. Like almost everything boils down to like love each other. And that's what the main overlap between most religions is. And there's so much of that extra, padding of the stuff that people take way too crazy. I almost got suspended from a private Christian school for suggesting that Jesus and Muhammad would be friends. I was like, they would probably hang out. Sure, they'd high five.
You got almost kicked out for that?
Yeah, they wouldn't, like, acknowledging the existence of another religion was like,
that's such
they taught in elementary school at a private Christian school, when you get to high school and they're teaching you science and they go over to evolution, leave the room. They said it's your right, your religious right, to just ignore this. And I said, couldn't the entirety of an evolution be, or the book of Genesis be like a metaphor for the entirety of evolution? Like the concept of a day didn't really exist before that. So if we're measuring 7 days, why take it literally? What if 7 days was, trillions of years or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Like the entirety of, and they also scolded me for that.
Right. They scalded you. They poured hot water on you. They scalded you.
Yeah. They scalded. That was the punishment.
To me, that's a very insecure way of arguing. Is to just be like, don't look at anything else. That seems like a sign of somebody who knows that they're bullshitting you. It's just like, oh, don't look at other evidence. Only look at my evidence. Only look at what I'm telling you because I know what's up. All that other stuff, just don't even look at it. Whereas the mature way of doing it would be like you're explaining, is just like, no, I mean, God could have created, he could have been the prime mover. Even you could even extrapolate it just down to God was just the prime mover that started the universe. And then everything else just happened according to the laws of nature and physics. And that still leaves room for having God as just the initiator of all the events. And all those events just slowly led to it. And then, the Genesis tale and most, religious texts based on the, beginning of humanity or the beginning of the world is just early humans trying to explain what they don't understand. And just
and I think that there's some sort of connection with, the universe, all of existence, life, love, good and evil, like
life, the universe, and everything. Great book by Douglas Adams.
We've been trying to, describe it for so long.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you really look at the evidence of Christianity as well, but most of those early religions that sprouted in the Fertile Crescent, Mesopotamian kind of area, especially the Abrahamic ones, but even like the Egyptian religion, that you see a lot of very similar arcs, which means it's either something that's sort of embedded within our DNA, which is to tell stories and to explain the world. And even if you don't know, like, what do you do to a little kid if they ask you a question that you don't know the answer to? You just make it up, because it gives that kid comfort, because they just heard the story and now they know why. Even if it's false, it still gives a sense of security to at least have an answer. It doesn't have to be the right answer. It doesn't have to be correct, but humans find comfort in having an answer. Mm-hmm. That being said, though, there's a lot of documentaries that I've watched and like things I've listened to and books I've read that talk about the idea of, like, you know, from the beginning of time. I mean, and all these religions boil down to worshiping the sun. Literally the sun in the sky. That's what brings life. That's what makes the wolves go to sleep. That's what, you know, warms us and keeps us warm and allows us to grow food. And, you know, I don't have all the details of everything, but, like, you know, the astrological sort of where the stars at the sky at certain times, like on the winter solstice, the crucifix or the crux, which is the cross-shaped zodiac sign, is right above the sun when it, you know, when it sets. And then the sun appears to not move any farther north. Basically, the sun stops, and for 3 days, which is how long Jesus was in the tomb for after he was killed and then resurrected. So the sun sleeps for 3 days, and then it arises a little bit farther south every single day after that. And that's the beginning of the new year. Yeah. That's when spring comes around and you can start harvesting your crops. That's when new animals are being born. So
interesting.
Yeah, from what I've heard, or from what I've studied, it's very likely that, you know, all of the stuff, I mean, this goes back to pagan religions, which early Christianity adopted a lot of early paganism. That's partly due to the Romans and how the Romans started integrating Christianity into their sort of pagan god structure. But it's all about, you know, the position of the sun in the sky and tracking the solar movements and basically tracking the year. And that's what sort of led into us turning, it's the telephone game that led us into turning that into a religion. It was all originally supposed to be like essentially a calendar of telling you when to plant your crops. You know, when can you expect to have, you know, a new spring of calves for your livestock. It's an interesting idea, and one that I subscribe to pretty well.
Yeah, well, I mean, makes the most sense. It's the most
logical.
It's the most basic of, you know, reliance. Like, we rely on the solar system, right? The rotation of the Earth, the rotation of the stars and the sun and the planets, and, you know, Roman gods like Mars, Jupiter.
Exactly.
You know, it's like
exactly. And the Greek gods, same thing. The Greek gods were all the planets, and it was all coming from they're observing the entire sky do one thing, but there's a couple of lights in there that are doing their own thing. So those must be gods. We're going to attribute them. And human beings are hardwired to read patterns into everything. Like, that's why, you know, that's why people on meth get paranoid. You know what I mean? Because they're finding patterns that aren't there, and every human does that. We all look for patterns. You know, that's how we survived as a species. We weren't the biggest, we weren't the strongest, we were the smartest. So we look for patterns of, like, oh, when it's nighttime, that's when the tigers eat us. But when the sun comes out, that's when we can see the tigers. So God is protecting us. He's giving us his warmth. He's protecting us from all of our predators that look like demons.
How do we get so deep into old philosophy and religion?
It kind of happens
anyway,
with me.
It always happens. It's a great subject, especially you and I talk about it really well. Well, I hate to do this. I know it's only been not an hour, but I've got a bunch of work stuff hitting me up. Yeah.
Oh, Charlie. I guess this one's going to be a little bit shorter of an episode. Well, let's give it.
And someone's here.
dogs. All right, I guess that's a good wrap up. Let's wrap this up a little bit. Yeah, don't believe in God. Is that a good summation? Stop believing in God. No, I'm just kidding. Believe in whatever you want to. And regardless of whether you believe in something or if you don't believe in something, doesn't change what's going to happen at the end of the day. Just makes you feel better. That's kind of what religion is. It's a nice little security blanket.
Yeah, I mean, it gives people comfort and something to, rely on or hold on to that is more than just themselves.
Yeah.
And I grew up in a very religious, school, family and stuff, but after learning more about other religion and, I have some family that's Buddhist, and learning more about that, I've considered myself spiritual. Like, I like to think about these things, and I feel like I'm connected to people in a way you can't describe, but I'm not religious in any official sense.
The way you put that was very, very Valley Girl. I'm not religious, but I'm like kind of
how much time I spend on, Instagram, Facebook. Yeah. That's me.
No, I totally agree with you. I understand the draw of religion, and I also understand like the comfort that it can give. But the biggest thing, okay, this will be a good wrap up, is the best thing that ever happened to the Catholic Church was the Protestant Reformation. Going back to our original discussion of the masses hold the power. So That's why I refuse to subscribe to any, organized religion, because people are inherently corrupt, and the bigger something gets, the more corruption sort of ekes its way into it. Whereas when the Protestant Reformation came around, it's Martin Luther saying, no, read the Bible, and it's your own personal journey. It's not, nobody can tell you what your relationship is to the higher being that you subscribe to. So power to the masses. Communism was a better idea. We should go back. Let's do it. Let's start a Marxist Reformation.
He's Red Ryan now.
Yeah, Red Ryan, dude. New nickname, Red Ryan, dude. Oh. Yeah,
on
dude.
That note,
the masses have the power. All right, everybody. I might do another outro after this, but thank you guys for watching. Thank you, Charlie.
Appreciate it, dude. Thanks for doing the Zoom calls. Worked out all right.
Yeah. Zoom's honestly easier. We might just make this more of the thing. That might just be, This might be a Zoom only podcast. Cool. Awesome. Thanks, guys. We'll catch you later.
Cool. All right.
Cool.
I got to take a shit like nobody's business, and then I got to get back into work stuff.
No worries,
I got like 5 missed calls. Just turned on silent. It's like,
oh, Jesus. All right, you guys. That's the episode. Short and sweet for you today. Check back next week. Upload every Wednesday. Follow us on the socials, all that good stuff, and we'll catch you next time. Peace.